Hello, you're watching TVP World News. I'm Jonasz Rewinski. Despite coming up with the idea for the talks himself, Vladimir Putin is not included on the Kremlin's list of attendees of the peace negotiations in Istanbul. Putin's prospective absence in Istanbul comes after the EU threatened Russia with sanctions, which were backed by US authorities during a recent meeting in Kyiv. Russia's delegation will instead be headed by Putin aide Vladimir Medinsky and will also include Russian Deputy Foreign Minister Mikhail Yurevich and Deputy Minister of Defense Alexander Fomin. The delegation does not include the Kremlin's top politicians, such as Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov. According to Russian authorities, the talks in Istanbul will be a resumption of the 2022 peace negotiations held at the onset of Russia's full-scale war against Ukraine. According to a leaked peace draft proposal from the period, both sides, back then, agreed to exclude Crimea from the treaty, leaving it under Russian occupation. The status of other Russian-occupied territories was to be decided in later talks between President Zalewski and Putin. NATO foreign ministers are meeting in Antalya, Turkey. Among them is US Secretary of State Marco Rubio. The meeting focuses on preparations for the pivotal summit of NATO leaders in The Hague next month. The informal talks of NATO foreign ministers are taking place amid a series of efforts to facilitate a ceasefire in Ukraine. The alliance is believed to be at a pivotal moment, while the United States refocuses its attention to the Pacific, and European states assume more responsibility for their own security. Therefore, the upcoming NATO summit in June is seen as a potentially historic moment for the alliance, requiring its member states to readjust their defense posture. While in Doha, US President Donald Trump said his administration is working closely with Saudi Arabian officials on negotiating a nuclear deal with Iran. Trump went on to say there are only two courses of action, a friendly and a violent one.
Working with us very closely with respect to negotiating a deal with Iran, which is the far friendlier course that you would see. I mean, we have two courses. There's only two courses. There aren't three or four or five. There's two. There's a friendly and a non-friendly. And the non-friendly is a violent course, and I don't want that. I'll say it up front. I don't want that. But they have to get moving. I hope the Iranian leaders understand that what you're doing, and really what you're doing for them is a big favor. Your prime minister, and your great leader, right here on my left, has been helping so much, and they respect them and they're listening to them, but they have to get moving, and we both understand that.
Poland is aiming to improve its access to US-provided arms, a move reportedly supported by Washington, according to the Polish Deputy Defense Minister Paweł Zalewski. According to the official, gaining access to US military technology and arms is a slow and complicated process and could be improved. The move reportedly received full support from both the US Congress and the Pentagon. Less regulations would be beneficial to Poland, a model ally as described by the deputy minister. Warsaw spends a staggering 5% of its GDP on defense. While Washington expects other European countries to increase their expenditures, Poland has already almost achieved this 5% threshold. The US also is reportedly expecting Poland to send troops to war-torn Ukraine, said the deputy minister following meetings at the Pentagon on Wednesday. Moreover, despite recent talks of Washington withdrawing its troops from Europe, Zalewski says Poland will not be affected by such moves. Referring to Europe's and Canada's defense expenditures up to this point, Diane Francis, senior fellow at the Atlantic Council, said that, and I quote, they've been freeloading off the US for many years. She added that just spending more money on defense isn't enough to adjust to a NATO with a diminished US presence.
They've been freeloading off the U.S. for many, many decades, let's face it. So has Canada. They've got to ratchet up their spending. They're trying to do it. It's not easy, and just spending is not enough. You have to put together military armed forces with lines of command, with facilities, with equipment, with training. All kinds of things have to happen. So yes, they're moving in that direction, and they have to, because the Americans are not going to support NATO much longer to the extent that they have, and that's very, very critical.
The Baltic Sea is being monitored above and beneath the surface, said Swedish Minister of Defense Paweł Jonsson, speaking in our show On the Record. Jonsson went on to say that Sweden is working closely with its international partners to keep Russia's activities in the sea at bay.
We monitor the situation on the Baltic Sea very closely, and we have assets and capabilities working on the surface. We operate with our 4 submarines. We're stepping up now to having 5 submarines, and we work in the air as well, both with our intelligence gathering and our radar surveillance capabilities. So we have a good situational awareness, and we see, of course, that the Baltic Sea has become more important for Russia at any time. On the Baltic Sea now there's about 4,500 vessels operating the whole time, and Russia is more dependent on the Baltic Sea now as well. So what we've predominantly been focusing also in identifying fleets that are connected with the shadow fleet as well, in order to identify more of those and put those on the sanction list. And then we, of course, follow the incidents as well. There's been about 15 cables all in all through 4 major incidents who's been affected by this. And we take note of this, and we increase our awareness and situation awareness. We collaborate very closely also internationally among the countries around the Baltic Sea in order to mitigate the risk that this will happen further on in the future.
And to hear more about the security of Europe, please visit our YouTube channel, where you'll find the latest episode of On the Record. Now, the European Union is preparing another sanctions package targeting the Russian economy. The latest 17th round of coercive measures is believed to be the toughest one yet, focusing on areas that made it possible to circumvent the bloc's sanctions in the past. Its future, however, remains in doubt, as Hungary may try to undermine the EU's unity on the matter. Angela Skujins reports from Brussels.
Ambassadors from the 27 EU member states met in Brussels on Wednesday to hammer out the 17th sanctions package aimed at bringing the Kremlin to its knees, putting pressure on that Russian President Vladimir Putin so he agrees to a ceasefire deal with that Ukrainian President Vladimir Zalewski. Now, the details of this sanctions package includes 100 names tied up in Russia's war machine, particularly operators of those Russian shadow fleet vessels, as well as individuals accused of human rights violations, as well as chemical warfare. We have heard warm words from the Berlaymont, including European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen, as well as the EU's top diplomat Kaja Kallas. But experts have told TVP World that for these sanctions to really bite, we need to see other partners, other allies such as the US and Canada getting serious on their own sanctions packages. Questions also loom regarding which way Hungary will vote at that final negotiating meeting on the 20th of May in Brussels. We know that Foreign Minister Peter Szijjártó has threatened to torpedo these discussions many times before, with that country's Prime Minister Viktor Orban raising those EU Council conclusions, withdrawing Hungary from the meaning that those 26 EU member states could not push forward without Hungary behind them. So all eyes will be on that meeting, whether to see it will have the teeth that the EU says it has to bring the Kremlin to the negotiating table. Angela Skujins from Brussels for TVP World.
NATO troops are carrying out a series of drills in order to test out their collective capabilities in land, cyber and airborne domains, as well as to verify their deterrence capabilities. These exercises, known as Griffin Lightning 25, also provide an insight into how quickly the alliance would be able to deploy forces should Article 5 be invoked. Zuzanna Jurek reports from Estonia.
16,000 troops have gathered in Estonia for the Griffin Lightning 25 exercises, organized by Multinational Corps Northeast. These exercises aim to test out the operational readiness, the speed of deployment, as well as the capabilities of the Multinational Command Corps in a simulated Article 5 environment. Additionally, the aim is to test out the synchronicity of command between the different multinational forces. The British command stationed in southern Estonia offered a glimpse into some of the challenges such a multinational command has to face.
It's just understanding how other militaries work and their own sort of tactics and procedures. And you can read them in a book, but actually you don't really actually understand it until you come out here and sort of work them through the problems.
Additionally, as questions loom over the speed of deployment of potential armed forces should a provocation from Russia or Belarus occur, the French command, also participating in these exercises, offered a glimpse into the timelines as well as the personnel numbers which we could expect to be deployed at immediate notice.
We came in with multiple way of transport, mainly railways for heavy equipment, but also by aircraft. And in 2 weeks, we are fully integrated, operable, and combat ready.
With these exercises unfolding for the remainder of May, it is hoped that the troops will continue to implement the lessons learned from previous combats which they've participated in, as well as the theatre of war in Ukraine, in order to test out the strength of capabilities, strategic as well as technical capabilities, ahead of potential clashes with adversaries. For TVP World, Zuzanna Jurek.
Making the export of food products to the European Union tougher could incentivize Kyiv to reroute its agricultural output to other markets, says Jan Michałek from the University of Warsaw. He suggests that building stronger trade relationships in and outside the European Union could enhance Ukraine's path to EU accession.
On the one hand, it should be a motivation to the Ukrainian delegation to speed up the process of negotiations, hopefully peaceful negotiations, and to reroute the exports of products by other, I would say, possible ways. On the other hand, I also hope that it will be an additional incentive for the EU trade policy to work on and continue to work on comprehensive, long-lasting free trade agreement. I would say it's also important because this will be an important experience for the future accession negotiations.
George Simeon, the far-right candidate in Romania's upcoming presidential elections, expressed his desire to build a pro-Trump MAGA alliance in Europe, alongside Karol Nawrocki, Polish presidential candidate backed by the right-wing Law and Justice Party.
George, welcome to Poland, welcome to Zabrze!
In an interview with the American conservative magazine, Simeon, leader of the radical right-wing Alliance for the Union of Romanians party, called Nawrocki a close ally and potential successor to Polish President Andrzej Duda. Simeon emphasized the possibility of forming a bloc of pro-Trump presidents to strengthen ties with the United States and enhance NATO's eastern flank stability. The second round of Romania's presidential elections will take place on the 18th of May, the same day as Poland's election. In this round, Simeon will face off against the pro-European mayor of Bucharest, Nicusz Ordan. In an exclusive interview with TVP World, Ivan Krastev, chairman of the Center for Liberal Strategies in Sofia, talked about the role of the European Union in safeguarding parts of the democratic process, referring to when presidential elections in Romania were annulled following claims of election interference by a foreign entity.
Decision of Constitutional Court. So you should imagine that the European Union is going to respect it because this was the decision of a very independent body. On the other side, I do believe it was a totally wrong decision. And the story was that you have a grand coalition government and their candidate didn't manage to go to the second round. Obviously, something was going wrong. And obviously, in the moment like this, to try to annul the first round of the elections, to stop a candidate running, you're deepening the crisis, you're not solving the crisis. And this is the story of European Union. You cannot believe that you can be simply legal and technical, because in a moment of a major polarization, the legal is political.
conclude our news bulletin. Please stay with us here on TVP World for more latest news, updates and commentary.